Well, good morning, brothers and sisters. Our live stream this morning is going to be, well, perhaps a little different than what we typically do. I saw a quote this morning that really kind of resonated with me, and that comes with a story attached to it. The quote was this. It said, "You cannot force someone to comprehend a message they are not ready to receive. But you must never underestimate the power of planting a seed." That's the quote, and with that then comes the story. So 20 years ago, long before I did what I do now, I was the senior warden of a little parish in Massachusetts, and I was working with a really talented priest who taught me so many things. Many of them I had no idea I was learning until many years later when I found myself reflecting on the things that he had taught me. Neither of us knew at the time that he was really preparing me to be rector of a congregation, for I wasn't yet ordained, I had not been called, and, well, that's a whole nother live stream story. But back to this one, he gave me a book that, I'll share the quick title with you, and he even inscribed a quote on there for me. And since I know it's backward for you, it said, "Rick, for our ministry together at Trinity, cheers from Paul." Well, I read the book. In fact, I brought it to the vestry retreat and talked with the vestry about it, and it was tough. It was not a message that we were ready to receive because many of the things in the book were very challenging to us. There were things in that book like the clergy are not the only ministers in the church. Oh. There were things like the vestry and the organizational structures are not supposed to be the board of directors. They too are spiritual leaders. Whoa, wait a minute. Things like the church doesn't exist to support the building exists to support the church. Now, in the year 2000, that bordered on heresy, my friends, and our leadership team, our vestry, was not ready to hear that, and it was a challenging process. Now, I put the book on a shelf and never worried about it again, but something told me not to get rid of it. And I've kept that book all these years. Here we are in 2020, and COVID has changed everything and given us a new lens with which to view the world, but in my world, to view the church. And we find ourselves in a position where, guess what we're learning? The church is not a building. The church is all of us. The church doesn't exist to support the building, but the building exists to support the church. And with that in mind, I want to show you just a little bit about this sacred space that we have here. So we're in the back of our church, and one of the first things you'll notice is the camera. We've never had a camera in our church before. This is an unusual addition, and yet without it, we wouldn't be able to do the live streams and worship the way we have been for these many months. You probably recognize this. We like to refer to it as Standing Set 2. That's where we do our coffee hour broadcast, and that has become a very important part of who and what we are at Epiphany. For the first few weeks, we would take this apart and put the church back together again. You see, we have chairs all kind of shoved up and chairs piled up in a corner. This was a challenge for us because that's not the way our building looks. And it took a few weeks before we realized that moving everything only would require us to move it back again since no one is in the building. Here we have one of our liturgical flower stands, which is always used for flowers, and yet now that's where we put hand sanitizer and masks. Our church has changed, my friends, and we are doing things in ways we have never done them before. And yet we have found ways to make the building suit the church and not the church suit the building. Look at the altar. We have chairs all over the place. The altar itself is still set, of course, but anything that's not on camera is a little bit out of kilter. And, I'm running up into the Thanksgiving thing. All right, I told you yesterday I wasn't going to give you a glimpse of the Thanksgiving layout, but here's a quick glimpse of what a beautiful job they did. All of this, my friends, helps us to minister to God's people, to worship together, to be the church in this COVID world. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's strange to be in the church building and not have it be the beautiful and sacred space it has always been. But in reality, of course it is. It still is. No matter what the building looks like, it is a sacred space. For God is present here. And we don't exist to support the building. The building exists to support the church and its ministry and its mission. Our mission is to share the gospel with all people, and that's what the building is allowing us to do. That's what this technology is allowing us to do. That was not something I was ready to hear 20 years ago. Nor were my colleagues. And frankly, there are a whole lot of churches right now who are in that same boat. They're not ready to hear that message either. The main thing I'm hearing from a lot of different church people is, can't we just go back to the way things were? And I know it's tempting to want to do that, but the answer is very likely no. Now, before you get all crazy about that, it doesn't mean we won't come back to worship together. Of course we will. COVID will end. But when we come back, we will have been changed by this experience. One of the ways we're going to do that is we are going to worship online now, or broadcast our worship services online going forward. That's become a huge part of who and what we are. And so it won't be an either or, it will be a both and. We will meet in the church, we will meet online, and we will find ways to be the church in new ways. We will adapt, we will work outside of our comfort zones. And believe me, we are way outside of our comfort zone. And yet, that's where God calls us to be right now. But as I reflect on it, one of the things that prepared me for this was a little seed planted by a wise rector 20 years ago that I wasn't ready to receive at the time. And yet when I look at the lessons in that book and the things it talks about, all I read is Epiphany, Epiphany, Epiphany. These are the things that we have done, and they are who we have become. So my brothers and sisters, take heart and be people of hope. We will return to worship together, but don't think that what we're doing now is not worshiping together, for we truly are worshiping together. Whether online or whether in person, God is worshiped, and we indeed are the church. So think about the messages that we send to one another. Think about the planting of seeds that we can do for one another. It brings me obviously to the parable of the sower, right? We know this one. I don't have to repeat the Bible verse, but to sum it up, a sower sows seed, and some falls on the path and is eaten up, some falls among the rocks, some falls upon the weeds, and others fall upon the good soil. And this is a great parable of Jesus, and the Sunday school teachers love it because it's a very simple one to understand. The message of the parable is obviously you want to be the good soil so that when the seed falls in you, it sprouts and takes root and produces an untold harvest. 10 times, 20 times, 100 times. But I want to offer you something else this morning, my friends. There's another way to look at that parable, and that is this. Don't worry about the soil. Don't worry about whether you're the rocky soil or the path or the good soil. Instead, what if you are the sower? What did the sower do? The sower didn't look at the ground and try to determine if the ground was ready for the seed. The sower just threw the seed out there and kept on sowing and sowing and sowing and sowing. And so, brothers and sisters, in this COVID world right now, be the sower. Spread the seed, regardless of where you think it might fall or not fall. Don't make value judgments about who's ready to receive it and who's not ready to receive it. Spread the seed, because you don't know what harvest will come of that seed. And it may not come immediately. It may take, well, in my case, 20 years. But when it takes hold, oh, brother, watch out. That is going to be some bountiful harvest.